Hello! So today I am here to tell you about the audiobooks that I listened to in the month of October. Do excuse the slightly orange lighting. It's now getting darker earlier, so this is just something we're going to have to put up with for the next few months. Anyway, I feel like I haven't filmed here for ages actually. I think it's because I've been filming largely on weekends when my partner's home and we live in sort of a studio space, so I don't film here when he's around. But anyway, so I listened to 3 things this month. I wasn't overly into my audiobooks this month. I feel like I say that every month, but yeah, I wasn't overly into them this month. I feel like I need to refresh my audiobook library. I cancelled my Audible subscription a while ago because I had a load of books on the back burner that I knew I was going to get to at some point, but I feel like I'm now at the point where I need to refresh things a little bit to get myself invigorated about audiobooks again. But anyway, so the first book I listened to this month was Wise Children by Angela Carter, narrated by Tracy Ullman. Now, I didn't give this book a star rating on Goodreads, and the reason being that I really didn't enjoy the listening experience, but I don't know how reflective that is on the story. So this is basically a story told from the perspective of a woman in her 70s. Her and her sister are performers in a circus. I don't know whether we ever learn what they do. I'm assuming we do. This is part of the reason why I just feel like I couldn't rate it. I just wasn't paying attention. I wasn't invested at all. But basically this is kind of a family saga about their time in the circus. The fact that they've never known their mother. They've been brought up by their gran and they think that their dad is like a big famous figure in the circus, but they're not sure. And it kind of just looks at the trials and tribulations day to day, what happens. And I have to say I found this really, really bland and dull, and I don't know whether it's because I was listening to it, and that's why I haven't rated it, because I don't feel like it's fair to judge this book on my listening experience. But it did get to the point where I was about halfway through and I was literally just forcing myself to listen to it because I really was just not bothered. I think Angela Carter is an author who I really love her magical stuff, but her other stuff is kind of just not for me, really. I just felt like I didn't really care about the characters in this story. I didn't really care about the story itself, and yeah, there were a few different things. I mean, what I really love about this is that it's got a really strong narrative voice and it's a really strong first person voice, and in a way it is quite a cinematic thing, and I mean the narration on this is fantastic. She really gets into character, but yeah, generally it was just not for me and not a success really. As I say, it's probably the first audiobook that I've listened to where I really have just been hoping that it'll end soon, which is a real shame. And as I say, I have held off giving it a rating. I haven't judged it from this. I think I need to get the physical book and read it and actually pay attention and absorb, because I think I automatically went on a flat line with this after listening to about an hour of it. So I assumed that it wasn't for me, and I think I probably unfairly didn't listen to it or concentrate on it as much as I should have as a result of that. So I'm not going to say too much about it because I don't think it's fair to judge, basically. Then I read Cheer Up Love Adventures with the Crab of Hate by Susan Calman, narrated by Susan Calman. Susan Calman is a Scottish comedian. I didn't really know much about her before getting this. I'd seen her on programmes like QI and I think a few other kind of quiz show programmes, but I didn't really know anything about her. Basically, this is a look at her life with depression. I didn't go into this expecting too much because, as I say, I didn't really know her. I listened to a few books along a similar vein. I absolutely adored this, and I don't think I have ever laughed so hard at a book since I can't remember when. I was laughing to the point of tears. It was just so good. So as I say, this looks at Susan Calman's life living with depression. It looks at how that's impacted her career in comedy. It looks at how it's impacted her relationship with her wife, and it looks at how she got herself help in the end and how she copes with these feelings that she gets sometimes, or as she calls it, the crab of hate. I think what's really fantastic about this, a lot of depression-esque memoirs talk about people on the edge, and while that is useful and important to get out there, you know, I also think it's important as well to talk about the basic stuff of living with depression. So Susan Calman sort of even jokes about the fact, you know, she's not going out and doing drugs, she's not stealing things, she's not trying to kill herself, she's just living a normal life with depression, and she finds that she doesn't have anything to compare that to, because all of the sort of text or the books that are already out there are talking about people who are engaging in addictive behaviour because of their depression, or are on the brink of suicide because of their depression. And she personally couldn't find anything that just speaks about living day to day, being a normal just person who loves to sit at home with their cats and watch Netflix, and living with depression while you're doing these things. And I think she's absolutely right. There aren't many books that are like that, and I think this was really refreshing in that sense. As I say, it's also very, very funny. There's a point in here where Susan Calman's trying to describe the fact that, you know, because you have depression and because nobody can see it, they're less sympathetic towards you, whereas when her wife got a broken leg, for instance, everybody was really on eggshells and doing everything for her and asking if she was okay. And the reason that her wife got a broken leg was because she had the chips and Susan was chasing her for the chips. Anyway, you have to listen to it. It's fantastic. I would recommend listening to it as well. I think Susan's narration of this is just hilarious and fantastic, and I could not recommend it enough. And then finally, I finished on Home Fire by Shamsie, narrated by Tanya Rodriguez. This is the book that won the Women's Prize this year. I have to say, for that reason alone, I've picked it up a few times and haven't really been gravitated towards it from reading the back of the book, but I don't think the back of the book does this any justice. Talking of things not doing this any justice, I'm sorry, Tanya Rodriguez, but I hated your narration of this book. So the narration is very stilted and just not good at all. I think the delivery of the speech in this book is astoundingly bad. I don't know whether that is because Tanya Rodriguez is quite a stilted and robotic narrator. I think it's partly that. I don't know whether it's also a reflection of the speech in the book. So that is something that I have to address. I think, especially from the listening experience, the speech was quite unrealistic and unnatural, and it kind of jarred me a lot, especially in the beginning. Also, the exposition at the start of this book is about the worst exposition I have ever read. For instance, the first scene is one of our main characters at an airport, and she's just arrived because she is going to be a student in America. And she's talking to the customs officer. She is a Muslim woman, but she has lived in England her whole life, and obviously it's highlighting the fact that she's kind of targeted because of origins. But during this discussion with the customs officer is saying things to her like, so you were going to this address on this place and you were doing this because of this. Like, literally, that is how bad the exposition was. And I was just like, oh, for the first half an hour I was like, this is just awful. But I really ended up enjoying this book. So what I didn't realise about this book from reading the blurb is that it's effectively about radicalism and how people are turned to radicalism and how that impacts that person's family. So particularly in this, we follow three siblings. We follow the girl who has gone to America, her sister back home, and also her sister's twin brother, who ends up going to Syria. And it basically looks at why he chooses to do that, how these people manage to convince him that that is something he should do, and also how he feels when he realises the untruths that they have told him, and also how this affects his two sisters. Obviously they come under a lot of scrutiny from the FBI and things like that because they are related to him, so they're sort of closely watched. And it ends up being a really fantastic book, and I think it's very exciting that a book like this has won the Women's Prize, because I think looking at radicalism from a sympathetic viewpoint is sadly not a very common thing, and I think this book really highlights that and looks at how things can be twisted to make you think that doing something awful is actually doing something good. So that, I think it's a really important book for that reason. As I say, I did have issues with it. The speech, not fantastic. I don't know how much of that is just the narration on the audiobook, and also the exposition at the beginning, terrible. However, but once you get into this and you really get into the story and you start knowing the characters, you just get swept away, and it's a heartbreaking and important book, and I would urge anybody to read this. So those are the three books I listened to this month. It's been a bit of a mixed bag, but generally we've come out on top with a few of them, especially Cheer Up Love was definitely the highlight of the month. Please let me know down below if you have been listening to any interesting audiobooks this month, and I will see you next time. Bye.